The moment my brother Truman grabbed the microphone at my wedding reception, I knew something was wrong. His face wore that same smirk I'd seen countless times growing up, the one that always preceded disaster. I'm Rosalie, and until 10 seconds ago, this was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. Before everyone continues celebrating, Truman's voice echoed through the ballroom, there's something my dear sister needs to know about her perfect Ramon. My stomach dropped. Ramon squeezed my hand under the table, but when I looked at him, his face had gone pale. Don't do this, Ramon muttered, half rising from his seat. What's going on? I whispered, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. The crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead as 200 guests fell silent, all eyes darting between Truman at the microphone and our table. My mother Valeria was already shaking her head, mouthing no at Truman. Ramon, Truman continued, pulling out his phone. Would you like to explain to my sister about Lexi? Or should I show everyone the marriage certificate myself? The room erupted in gasps. Ramon's hand went limp in mine as the blood drained from my face. Marriage certificate? Ramon? My voice cracked. What is he talking about? He finally looked at me, guilt written across his features. Rosalie, I can explain. He's already married, Truman announced, his voice cutting through the growing murmurs. Has been for 3 years. To a lovely woman named Lexi Phillips in Houston. I have the proof right here. My cousin Eloise was at my side in an instant, her arm around my shoulders as I struggled to breathe. The room started spinning as Ramon stood up, knocking over his champagne glass. It's not what you think, Ramon pleaded. Lexi and I, it's complicated. We've been separated. Save it. I managed to say, my voice stronger than I felt. How long have you known about this? I turned to Truman. He shrugged, still holding the microphone. Long enough to do my due diligence. Someone had to look out for you, sis. Look out for me? I stood up, my white dress suddenly feeling like a straitjacket. You waited until my wedding day to tell me this? I needed concrete proof, Truman said. But something in his expression didn't sit right. There was satisfaction there, not concern. My mother finally reached him, trying to grab the microphone. That's enough, Truman. This isn't the time or place. Oh, but it is, he insisted, dodging her grasp. Better now than after they've signed the marriage license, right? The room was chaos now. Guests were standing, phones were out, and I could hear the whispers spreading like wildfire. Ramon was still trying to explain, but his words washed over me like static. Show me, I demanded, walking toward Truman. Show me this proof. He handed me his phone, and there it was, a marriage certificate with Ramon's signature, dated 3 years ago. The woman's name, Lexi Phillips, stared back at me like an accusation. I was going to tell you, Ramon said from behind me. Lexi and I are getting divorced. I spun around. When? When exactly were you planning to tell me? Before or after we said, I do? Rosalie, please. Don't. I held up my hand. Don't you dare try to explain. I looked around the room, at my mother's horrified face, at Truman's barely concealed satisfaction, at Ramon's desperate expression. Something wasn't adding up. Truman had never been protective of me before. In fact, he'd spent most of our lives competing with me, trying to overshadow my achievements. How did you find this? I asked him. Does it matter? I saved you from making a huge mistake, but I saw it then. The quick glance between him and Ramon, so fast I almost missed it. This wasn't about protecting me at all. I grabbed my bouquet from the head table and threw it directly at Truman's chest. You're right about one thing, I said, my voice carrying across the silent room. You saved me from a huge mistake, but I don't believe for 1 second that was your intention. I turned to address our guests, summoning every ounce of dignity I could muster. I apologize for the drama, everyone. Please enjoy the food and drinks. They're already paid for. I need some air. As I walked toward the exit, Eloise fell into step beside me. I heard my mother calling after me, Ramon's protests, but I didn't stop. In the reflection of the ballroom's mirrors, I caught one last glimpse of Truman's face. The smirk was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like worry. Good. He should be worried. Because as I pushed through those doors, I wasn't just leaving my ruined wedding behind. I was already planning how to uncover what my dear brother and my would-be husband were really up to. "You need to drink something," Eloise said, pushing a glass of water into my hands. We'd taken refuge in the bridal suite, where I'd spent the morning getting ready, full of hope and excitement. Now those feelings seemed like a cruel joke. "I need answers," I replied, pacing the room in my wedding dress. "Did you see how they looked at each other? Truman and Ramon?" A knock at the door made us both jump. "Rosalie?" My mother's voice. "Please let me in." I nodded to Eloise, who opened the door. Mom rushed in, her makeup streaked with tears. "Sweetheart, I'm so sorry." "Did you know?" I asked, cutting her off. "Of course not. How could you think—" Another knock interrupted her. This time it was Ramon. "Get out," I snapped as he stepped into the room. "Just give me 5 minutes," he pleaded. "I can explain everything." "Explain what? How you forgot to mention you're married?" "Lexi and I separated 2 years ago. The divorce is almost final." "Almost?" I laughed bitterly. "So you were going to commit bigamy today?" Ramon ran his hands through his hair. "The papers are filed. It's just taking longer than expected because—" "Because what?" Truman's voice came from the doorway. He leaned against the frame, looking far too casual for someone who'd just blown up a wedding. "Get out, both of you," I demanded. "Sis, I know you're angry, but—" "Angry?" I stepped toward Truman. "You've been sitting on this information for how long? And you choose my wedding day to reveal it?" I needed to be sure. Bullshit. I was inches from his face now. "You and Ramon are hiding something, and I'm going to find out what it is." Ramon's face twitched. "Truman was just looking out for you." "Stop lying." I grabbed my phone from the vanity. "Should we call Lexi right now? See what she has to say about all this?" Both men froze. That's when I knew I'd hit something. "You have her number?" Ramon asked, too quickly. "Not yet, but I will." I turned to Eloise. "Can you get these people out of here?" "Everyone out," Eloise announced, herding them toward the door. "Now." "Rosalie, please." My mother tried one last time. "Let's just talk about this." "Mom, I love you, but I need space right now." Once they were gone, I collapsed onto the plush sofa, my wedding dress pooling around me. Eloise sat beside me, pulling out her own phone. "What are you doing?" "Looking up Lexi Phillips in Houston," she said. "Social media, LinkedIn, anything I can find." "You think she's real?" The marriage certificate looked real enough. Eloise's fingers flew across her screen. But something's definitely off about this whole thing. My phone buzzed with a text from Dallas, Ramon's business partner. "Need to talk to you. Alone. It's important." I showed the message to Eloise. "What do you think?" "Dallas always seemed straight up," she said. "Unlike your brother and Ramon." Another knock at the door made me groan, but this time it was the wedding planner, looking anxious. "Ms. Rosalie, there's a situation in the ballroom. Your brother and Mr. Ramon are having a rather heated discussion." Eloise and I exchanged looks before hurrying to the ballroom. Through the partially open doors, we could hear raised voices. "This wasn't the deal," Ramon was saying. "You said—" "I said I'd handle it," Truman hissed back. "And I did." "By blowing everything up?" "You wanted out, didn't you?" I pulled out my phone and started recording, but they must have spotted movement because they immediately fell silent. When we entered, they were standing far apart, both trying to look innocent. "Handle what exactly?" I asked, making them both jump. "Nothing," Truman said quickly. "Just wedding logistics." "More lies?" I held up my phone. "Want to try again?" Ramon stepped forward. "Rosalie, whatever you think you heard." "Save it." I turned to the remaining guests. "Show's over, everyone. Thank you for coming to my non-wedding." As people began filtering out, I caught Dallas's eye across the room. He gave me a subtle nod toward the exit. I need some real air, I told Eloise. Cover for me? She squeezed my hand. Go, I'll keep an eye on the dynamic duo. Outside, the summer evening was cooling off, but my blood was boiling. My phone buzzed again. Dallas asking me to meet him in the hotel bar in 20 minutes. I looked down at my wedding dress and laughed. What better way to get information than to be the jilted bride everyone was talking about? I headed for the bar, already formulating my questions. Whatever game Truman and Ramon were playing, they'd picked the wrong woman to mess with. The hotel bar fell silent as I walked in, still wearing my wedding dress. Dallas was already there, nursing what looked like whiskey at a corner table. He stood as I approached, his face grim. You look like you could use a drink, he said, pulling out a chair for me. I could use the truth, I replied, sitting down. Start talking. The bartender appeared with a martini. On the house, she said sympathetically. I heard what happened upstairs. Thanks. I took a long sip before facing Dallas. What do you know? He glanced around before leaning forward. Ramon's been moving money around, large amounts. At first, I thought it was just normal business operations, but what? Your brother's fingerprints are all over it. Dallas pulled out his phone, showing me a series of transactions. See these transfers? They're going through shell companies that Truman set up. My hands shook as I looked at the numbers. How much? Nearly 2 million so far. The martini suddenly tasted bitter. And Lexi? Ramon's wife? That's where it gets interesting. Dallas swiped to another screen. She exists, but she's not just Ramon's wife. She's also… Well, isn't this cozy? Truman's voice cut through our conversation. He stood at the bar entrance, Ramon right behind him. I slipped Dallas's phone into my lap under the table. Just getting the truth you couldn't be bothered to tell me. Dallas, Ramon said, his voice tight. We need to talk. Actually, Dallas stood up, straightening his tie. I think I've said everything I need to say. You signed an NDA, Ramon reminded him. Which doesn't cover fraud, Dallas shot back. Truman stepped forward. You don't know what you're talking about. I know exactly what I'm talking about. Dallas turned to me. Check your email. I sent you everything I have. As he walked out, Ramon moved to follow him, but Truman grabbed his arm. Let him go. We need to deal with this first. Deal with what? I stood up, grabbing my martini. Your sister finding out you're both crooks? It's not what you think, Truman started. You keep saying that. I downed the rest of my drink. But you know what I think? I think you're both scared of what Dallas just told me. My phone buzzed. Eloise texting that she'd found something about Lexi. I needed to get out of there. Rosalie? Ramon reached for my arm, but I jerked away. Please, just listen. To more lies? I laughed. No thanks. I've had enough of those to last a lifetime. I pushed past them, but Truman called after me. That money you got from Dad's estate? You might want to check where it really came from. I froze. Our father had died 2 years ago, leaving me a substantial inheritance. Truman had handled all the paperwork. What did you do? I turned back slowly. Nothing that can't be fixed, he said smoothly. If you drop whatever Dallas told you. Are you blackmailing me? At my non-wedding? I'm trying to protect you. Like hell you are. My voice rose, drawing attention from other bar patrons. You're trying to protect yourself. Ramon stepped between us. Keep your voice down. Or what? I challenged. More secrets will come out? Good. Let them all come out. My phone buzzed again, this time with an email notification from Dallas. Truman's eyes locked onto my screen. Whatever he sent you, he warned, think carefully before you open it. Or what? I repeated, backing toward the exit. You'll ruin another special occasion? Too late for that. Once in the lobby, I ran straight into Eloise. You won't believe what I found. she said, pulling me toward the elevators. Lexi Phillips isn't just Ramon's wife. She's a federal investigator. The elevator doors closed just as Truman and Ramon emerged from the bar. Through the closing gap, I saw their panicked expressions. A federal investigator? I pressed the button for my floor. What's she investigating? Financial fraud, Eloise said. And guess whose company is at the center of it? Ramon's? And your brother's. They're both under investigation, have been for months. The pieces started falling into place. That's why Truman exposed Ramon today. He was trying to create a distraction, make it look like he was protecting me. While actually protecting himself, Eloise finished. In my room, I opened Dallas's email. Documents, transaction records, emails between Truman and Ramon. It was all there. Look at this. I showed Eloise a particular email chain. They've been planning this for months, using my wedding as cover for something bigger. What are you going to do? I kicked off my wedding shoes and pulled out my laptop. First, I'm going to call Lexi Phillips. Then I'm going to make my dear brother and ex-fiancé wish they'd never tried to use me as their pawn. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Smart move with Dallas. Let's talk. Lexi. I've been tracking your brother and Ramon for 18 months. Lexi's voice came through my speakerphone, clear and professional. We're close to making arrests, but we need more concrete evidence. I sat on my hotel bed, still in my wedding dress, with Eloise beside me. And your marriage to Ramon? Part of my cover. He doesn't know I'm federal. He thinks I'm just another investor he can manipulate. So the marriage certificate Truman showed everyone is real, Lexi confirmed. But it was necessary for the investigation. I never expected him to use it like this. A knock at the door made us jump. Rosalie? My mother's voice. Please open up. I muted the phone. Not now, Mom. Your brother's been arrested. The police are downstairs. Eloise and I exchanged shocked looks. I unmuted the call. Lexi, did you— That wasn't us, she said quickly. Something else must have happened. Where's Ramon? I opened the door to find my mother in tears. What do you mean Truman's been arrested? 2 officers just took him from the hotel bar, she sobbed. Something about financial fraud. Ramon disappeared right after. My phone buzzed with a text from Dallas. Ramon's running. Back parking lot. Hurry. I have to go, I told my mother, already moving toward the elevator. Eloise, stay with her. Rosalie, wait. Lexi's voice came through the phone. Don't confront him alone. But I was already racing down the hallway, my wedding dress hitched up around my knees. In the elevator, I kicked off my heels, leaving them behind as I ran through the lobby in bare feet. The back parking lot was dark except for security lights. I spotted Ramon trying to unlock a car, not his usual vehicle. Running away? I called out. That's not suspicious at all. He spun around. Rosalie, you don't understand. Actually, I understand perfectly. I held up my phone. I have all the evidence, Ramon. The fraud, the money laundering, everything. You talked to Lexi. His face hardened. What did she tell you? Enough to know you're both going to prison. I stepped closer. Unless you want to explain why you and my brother stole my inheritance? Your inheritance? He laughed bitterly. That money was gone long before we touched it. Your father— A car screeched into the parking lot, headlights blazing. Dallas jumped out. Ramon, don't say another word. You betrayed me, Ramon snarled at Dallas. You betrayed yourself, Dallas replied. And her. He nodded toward me. More cars were pulling in now. Police vehicles. Ramon looked around wildly like a trapped animal. It's over, I said quietly. Just tell me why. Why involve me at all? Because we needed a clean account to move the money through. He admitted. Your inheritance made you perfect. Truman said, freeze, hands where we can see them. Officers emerged from the vehicles, weapons drawn. As they handcuffed Ramon, Lexi appeared beside me, badge visible on her belt. You okay? No, I answered honestly, but I will be. Back in the hotel lobby, my mother was waiting with Eloise and several officers. They're saying Truman stole from clients, she whispered, that he and Ramon were running some kind of scheme. They were, Mom. I hugged her tightly, and they used my wedding as cover. Miss? An officer approached. We'll need your statement. The next few hours passed in a blur of questions and statements. I learned that Truman and Ramon had been running a complex fraud scheme, using my inheritance and wedding as legitimate fronts for their illegal activities. They'd planned to disappear after the ceremony, leaving me to deal with the fallout. Around midnight, Eloise brought me a change of clothes. As I finally got out of my wedding dress, my phone buzzed with a message from Truman, sent from the police station. I can still fix this. Don't tell them anything else. I showed the message to Lexi, who'd stayed to help with the investigation. Classic manipulation, she said. He's trying to maintain control. What happens now? Now? She smiled grimly. Now we build an airtight case. With your help, we can make sure they both face consequences for every single thing they've done. I looked at my reflection in the hotel room mirror, barefoot, exhausted, but somehow stronger than I'd been this morning in my wedding dress. They thought they could use me, I said, that I was just some naive little sister who wouldn't figure it out. Their biggest mistake, Eloise added, squeezing my shoulder. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Truman. Family should stick together. I typed back a single response. We're not family anymore. Then I turned to Lexi. Tell me everything you need to know. It's time they learned what happens when you underestimate the wrong woman. Your brother's requesting a meeting, Lexi said, sliding a visitor request form across the table. 1 week had passed since my non-wedding, and we were sitting in the federal building's conference room. Why would I want to see him? Because he's offering to tell us everything about Ramon's overseas accounts, she replied. But he'll only talk to you. I stared at the form. He's trying to make a deal. Most likely. Lexi leaned forward. But we could use this, if you're up for it. Dallas, who'd been helping with the investigation, spoke up from his corner. It's risky. Truman's manipulative. I know my brother. I cut in. And I know exactly how to handle him. 2 hours later, I sat across from Truman in a sterile visitation room. He looked terrible in his orange jumpsuit, exactly as he deserved. You're looking well, he said, attempting his usual smirk. Amazing what getting rid of toxic people can do for your complexion. His smirk faltered. Mom's not taking my calls. Can you blame her? Her son stole from his sister and used her wedding as cover for fraud. I was trying to protect you. Stop. I slammed my hand on the table. No more lies. You want to make a deal? Start with the truth. He glanced at the observation mirror, knowing Lexi and others were watching. Ramon has accounts, offshore, money that could help reduce my sentence. And what do you want in exchange? Your help. He leaned forward. Tell them I was manipulated, that Ramon masterminded everything. I laughed, cutting him off. You really don't get it, do you? I found your old emails. The ones where you pitched this whole scheme to Ramon 2 years ago. His face paled. Did you really think Dallas was the only one with access to those servers? I pulled out my phone, reading from an email. Ramon, the perfect setup just fell into our laps. My sister's inheritance gives us a clean account to work with. Want to hear more? Those emails are inadmissible. Not anymore. The FBI has them now. Legally obtained with a warrant. Truman's facade cracked. You don't understand what you've done. Actually, I do. I stood up. I've made sure my big brother faces consequences for once in his life. Wait. He called as I turned to leave. There's more, about Dad's company. I paused at the door. You mean how you and Ramon were stealing from it before he died? Yeah, we know about that too. Back in the observation room, Lexi was smiling. That rattled him. He'll be more willing to talk now. He's already talking, Dallas added, checking his tablet. Our team just got into the encrypted files he kept on his home server, the ones he thought were safe. My phone buzzed, a text from my mother. Ramon's wife is at the house. The real one. What? I showed Lexi the message. Impossible, she said. I'm Ramon's only wife. Unless... Dallas pulled up some files. Unless he committed actual bigamy. Not just with Lexi's undercover marriage, but I need to get to my mom's house, I said, already heading for the door. 20 minutes later, I pulled up to find a sleek black car in the driveway. Inside, my mother sat rigid on the couch while a stunning woman paced the living room. You must be Rosalie, the woman said. I'm Victoria, Ramon's wife. His first wife. That's not possible, I replied. Lexi is his second wife, and you would have been his third. Victoria pulled out her phone. I've been tracking him for years. Every time he does this, finds a wealthy woman, arranges a marriage, then disappears with their money. My mother made a choked sound. Years? 5 different women in 3 states, Victoria confirmed. I'm working with authorities in all of them. My phone buzzed again. Lexi. Victoria's story checks out. Ramon's been running marriage scams longer than our investigation. We need her testimony. I looked at Victoria. Why come forward now? Because you're the first one who fought back. She smiled grimly. The others were too embarrassed, too ashamed. But you? You exposed him. And now we can stop him for good. I sank into a chair, processing this new information. Does Truman know about this? Your brother? Victoria checked her notes. He only knew about the financial fraud. Ramon kept his marriage scams separate. My mother finally spoke up. All those business trips Ramon took. He was visiting his other families, Victoria finished. Building other lives, other scams. My phone lit up with another message, this time from Dallas. Ramon's asking for a deal too. Says he'll give up everything on Truman. I showed the message to Victoria. Looks like they're turning on each other. She nodded approvingly. Good. Let them destroy each other. Makes our job easier. Our job? Bringing down every last piece of their operation. She held out her hand. What do you say? Want to help me destroy the man who tried to destroy us? I took her hand, feeling a new sense of purpose. When do we start? They're both requesting plea deals, Lexi announced, spreading files across my dining room table. 3 weeks had passed, and my house had become unofficial headquarters for what the FBI now called Operation Wedding Crash. Victoria pointed to a document. Ramon's offering to reveal his entire network of marriage scams. And Truman's promising to expose every fraudulent transaction. Dallas added. Let them both talk, I said, sorting through the papers. The more they try to save themselves, the more they'll incriminate each other. My doorbell rang. Eloise, who'd been quietly taking notes, went to answer it. She returned with my mother, who looked like she hadn't slept in days. Truman's lawyer called, Mom said without preamble. He wants me to testify that Ramon manipulated him into everything. And? I watched her carefully, and I told him to go to hell. She sat down heavily. I've been going through old bank statements. The money your father left for your college fund. Truman stole that too. Victoria handed her a glass of water. Mrs. Moore, we need to talk about the family business accounts. What about them? Your late husband's signature on several transfers. Lexi interjected gently. They appear to be forged. Mom's hand shook as she took a sip. Truman had power of attorney after your father's stroke. He handled everything. Including this, Dallas said, pulling up a document on his laptop. A transfer of $500,000 to Ramon's shell company, dated 2 days after your husband passed. I watched my mother's face crumple. He didn't even wait for Dad to be buried. The doorbell rang again. This time it was Ramon's mother, looking equally devastated. I found these, she said, placing a stack of wedding invitations on the table. In Ramon's storage unit. Different names, different cities. Victoria picked them up, nodding grimly. He used the same printer I did for our wedding. Same design, just change the names. 5 weddings in 3 years, Lexi confirmed, each time targeting women with significant assets or inheritances. My phone buzzed, a text from Truman. Mom's not answering. Tell her I need bail money. Family helps family. Still trying to manipulate, Eloise observed, reading over my shoulder. Speaking of manipulation, Dallas said, Ramon's lawyer reached out. Says he has information about other conspirators. More people involved? I asked. A network of wedding planners, jewelers, even caterers, Lexi explained. All in on the scam, all taking a cut. The same vendors he suggested for our wedding, I realized. They were all part of it? Every single one, Victoria confirmed. They help legitimize the weddings, then participate in the money laundering afterward. Another text from Truman. You're making a mistake. I protected you your whole life. Protected me? I said aloud. By stealing my inheritance, my college fund? Dad's money? He's desperate, Lexi noted. They both are. Their whole operation is crumbling. My mother stood suddenly. I need to see him. Mom, no, not to help him, she said firmly. To tell him exactly what I think of what he's done. Ramon's mother nodded. I'll go with you. I have some things to say to my son as well. After they left, Victoria spread out more documents. We need to move quickly. Once word gets out about their arrests, their other accomplices will start covering their tracks. Already happening, Dallas reported, checking his phone. The wedding planner from your ceremony just bought a plane ticket to Mexico. Not anymore, Lexi said, making a call. This is Agent Phillips. I need that flight flagged. I stepped out onto my porch, needing air. Eloise followed. You okay? I should be devastated, I said. My brother's a criminal. My fiancé is a serial con man. My whole wedding was a front for fraud. But all I feel is angry and ready to make them pay. My phone buzzed again, this time from an unknown number. This is just the beginning. Wait until the press finds out about your family's involvement. I showed it to Eloise, who immediately called Lexi outside. Ramon's threatening to drag your family through the mud? Lexi said, reading the text. Classic deflection tactic. Let him try, I replied, walking back inside. Victoria, show me those wedding vendor lists again. I think I know how we can track down every single person involved in their scams. As we gathered around the table, I felt a grim satisfaction. Ramon and Truman thought they could use my wedding to cover their crimes. Instead, they'd given me everything I needed to destroy their entire operation. Where do we start? Dallas asked. I picked up the stack of fake wedding invitations. We start by showing them what happens when you mess with the wrong bride. The courthouse buzzed with tension as I took the witness stand. 2 months of investigation had led to this moment. The preliminary hearing that would determine if Ramon and Truman would face trial. Please state your name for the record, the prosecutor began. Rosalie Morgan. And your relationship to the defendants? Truman is my brother. Ramon was my fiancé. Ramon sat at the defense table wearing an ill-fitting suit, while Truman slouched beside his own lawyer. Both avoided my gaze. Ms. Morgan, when did you first become aware of the defendant's fraudulent activities? At my wedding, I said clearly. When my brother exposed Ramon's marriage to an undercover federal agent. Objection! Ramon's lawyer stood. The witness is speculating about... Your Honor? The prosecutor interrupted. We have Agent Phillips here to testify about her undercover role. Overruled, the judge said. Continue. I detailed everything. The stolen inheritance, the forged signatures, the network of corrupt wedding vendors. With each revelation, I watched Truman sink lower in his chair. And this document. The prosecutor held up an email. Can you identify it? That's an email from my brother to Ramon, planning how to use my wedding as cover for their money laundering operation. Ramon's lawyer stood again. Your Honor, my client was merely... Merely what? I cut in, my voice sharp. Merely planning to marry me while already married to 2 other women? Merely stealing my inheritance? Merely, Ms. Morgan, the judge warned. Please respond only to questions asked. Sorry, Your Honor. The prosecutor continued. What happened when you confronted your brother about the fraud? He tried to blackmail me, said he'd ruin our family's reputation if I didn't stay quiet. In the gallery, I heard my mother's soft sob. Victoria sat beside her, offering silent support. And Mr. Ramon's response when confronted? He ran, literally tried to flee the scene before being arrested. Ramon finally looked at me, his face a mask of practiced innocence. I stared back until he looked away first. The prosecution calls Victoria Ramon, the judge announced. As I left the stand, Victoria squeezed my hand before taking my place. For the next hour, she methodically detailed Ramon's history of marriage scams, complete with documentation of every fraudulent wedding. During a brief recess, Lexi pulled me aside. They're cracking. Ramon's lawyer just approached us about a plea deal. What's he offering? Full cooperation against Truman and the entire vendor network, in exchange for a reduced sentence. And Truman? Still playing tough, but she checked her phone. Hold that thought. His lawyer's calling now. Dallas joined us, tablet in hand. The wedding planner just confessed, gave up everyone involved in the scheme. Back in the courtroom, the evidence mounted. Bank records, forged documents, witness testimonies, it all painted a picture of elaborate fraud spanning years. Then came the moment that broke Truman completely. The prosecutor played a video recording from my father's hospital room, taken days before his death. In it, Truman promised to protect the family's assets, to look after me, to honor Dad's wishes. Your Honor, Truman's lawyer stood suddenly. My client wishes to change his plea. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Ramon's lawyer quickly followed suit. Both defendants wish to enter guilty pleas? The judge asked. Yes, Your Honor, they replied in unison. As the judge detailed the plea agreements, I felt Eloise's hand on my shoulder. It's really over, she whispered. But I wasn't done. I stood up. Your Honor, before you accept their pleas, there's something else. The judge nodded. Proceed. I turned to face my brother and ex-fiancé. You didn't just steal money. You stole trust. You stole family. You stole memories that should have been real. No plea deal can fix that. Ms. Morgan, the judge said gently, are you opposing the plea agreements? No, Your Honor. I just want them to know that while they're sitting in their cells, I'll be working with every one of their victims. We're going to rebuild what they destroyed, and we're going to make sure everyone knows exactly who they really are. Truman finally spoke up. Rosalie, please. No, I cut him off. You don't get to beg anymore. You're not my brother. You're just another criminal who picked the wrong target. The judge called for order as Ramon and Truman were led away. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited with cameras and microphones. Ready for this? Lexi asked. I straightened my shoulders, Victoria and my mother flanking me. Time to tell the real story. No more secrets, no more lies. As we pushed through the courthouse doors, cameras flashing, I realized this wasn't just an ending. It was a beginning. A chance to help other victims, to expose other scammers, to turn my ruined wedding into something meaningful. Ms. Morgan, reporters called out. What do you want people to know? I stepped up to the microphones, ready to speak my truth. Another one? Eloise handed me a letter as I walked into my office at the Fraud Victims Advocacy Center. Third this week, I confirmed, recognizing the prison letterhead. Truman's getting desperate now that his appeal was denied. Want me to shred it like the others? No. I sat at my desk, opening the envelope. Let's see what creative excuse my brother has today. The letter was shorter than usual, just 3 lines. I'm sorry, I know that's not enough, but it's all I have left to give. At least he's finally being honest, Eloise said, reading over my shoulder. My phone buzzed, Victoria calling. You're not going to believe this, she said when I answered. Ramon's mother just turned over all his offshore account information. Says she found it hidden in their family vacation home. How much? Millions, and a list of every victim going back 6 years. I put her on speaker as Lexi walked in. Perfect timing, Lexi said. We just got approval to expand the victim recovery program nationwide. Speaking of recovery, Dallas called from his desk across the office. The wedding planner's testimony just helped us bust another ring in Miami. Same scam, different players. I pinned Ramon's latest victim list to our evidence board, next to dozens of other photos and documents. What had started as my personal nightmare had grown into something bigger. A nationwide operation to expose wedding fraud schemes and help victims recover. Your mother's here, Eloise said softly. Mom stood in the doorway, looking stronger than she had in months. The house sold, she announced, above asking price. The family home, too full of memories and lies to keep. The proceeds would help repay some of what Truman had stolen from Dad's estate. Also, she continued, I've been talking to other parents, people whose children did what Truman did. We're starting a support group. That's amazing, Mom. It helps, she said simply. Turning pain into purpose, my phone buzzed again. A text from Ramon's latest almost victim, a woman we'd warned just in time. He showed up at my sister's wedding. Police got him. Add another violation of parole to his record, Lexi noted, already making calls. Victoria walked in, carrying files. Ready for the support group meeting? We have 3 new members. Women he tried to marry? 2 of them. The third is someone Truman scammed through the family business. I gathered my materials for the meeting, including the journal where we tracked every victory, every recovered dollar, every prevented fraud. The same journal that had started with my own ruined wedding day. Ms. Morgan? A young woman appeared in the doorway, clutching a wedding invitation. I think my fiancé might be... Come in, I said warmly, recognizing the fear and doubt in her eyes. You're safe here. Tell us everything. As she spoke, my team moved with practiced efficiency. Eloise started background checks, Dallas traced financial records, Victoria pulled similar case files. I feel so stupid, the woman whispered. No, I said firmly. They're the stupid ones, because every time they try this scam, we'll be here, and we'll stop them. My phone lit up with a message from the prison warden. Ramon requesting another meeting. Says he has more names. Good, I replied, because we have more evidence. The young woman looked at our evidence board with wide eyes. How do you do this every day? Work with these constant reminders? I showed her the other side of the office, our success board. Photos of reunited families, recovered assets, prevented frauds. Headlines announcing arrests, convictions, restitutions. Because every reminder is also a lesson, I explained. And every lesson helps us protect someone else. Mom joined us, putting an arm around the young woman. Come on, the support group is about to start. You'll see you're not alone. As they left, I looked around at my team. At Eloise's determined focus, Victoria's quiet strength, Lexi's unwavering dedication, Dallas's meticulous research. At the office that had grown from my personal quest for justice into a refuge for others. Another letter from the prison, Eloise said, handing me an envelope. But this time, I dropped it unopened into my desk drawer. Truman's words didn't matter anymore. Neither did Ramon's manipulations or their endless excuses. What mattered was the woman in the support group, finding her strength. The evidence board, telling its truth. The team around me, fighting the good fight. They thought they could break me with their betrayal. Instead, they gave me a purpose. A mission. A way to turn their destruction into something constructive. Ready for the next case? Lexi asked. I picked up my files, straightened my shoulders, and nodded. Always ready. Let's get to work.
I never thought I'd be telling this story. Well, looking back now, I wonder how I missed all the signs. But I guess when you're living in what you think is a perfect marriage, you see what you want to see. My name is Isabella, and until 6 months ago, I thought I had it all figured out. Logan and I lived in my grandmother's old apartment, a spacious place in the city that she left to me in her will. Logan worked as a realtor at Bennett and Associates, always coming home with stories about the crazy housing market and clients who wanted swimming pools in impossible places. I kept busy as a construction company manager, which meant we both understood each other's work stress. When people asked how we met, we'd laugh and tell them it was meant to be, a realtor and a construction manager, building our future together. "Honey, the Petersons are coming over tonight," Logan would say, grabbing his coffee before heading out. And Brittany asked if she could bring Tommy again. She couldn't find a sitter. Ah, Brittany. She worked with Logan at the agency, this petite blonde single mom who always seemed to need help with something. I remember the first time she came to one of our gatherings, clutching her little boy's hand like a lifeline. "I'm so sorry to bring him," she'd said, looking apologetic. "I just don't have anyone to watch him." "Don't be silly," I'd replied, watching the toddler toddle around our living room. "He's absolutely welcome here." I spent many evenings watching Tommy while Brittany mingled with our other guests. He was such a sweet kid, always ready with a hug and calling me Auntie Bella. Sometimes I'd catch myself imagining what it would be like to have our own child running around the apartment. That was our one cloud in an otherwise sunny sky. Logan and I had been trying for a baby since our first anniversary. 4 years of marriage, 3 years of actively trying, and nothing. Every month brought new disappointment, but Logan always knew exactly what to say. "It'll happen when it's meant to happen, he'd whisper, holding me close. "And if it doesn't, we can always adopt. There are so many kids who need homes." We rarely fought, and when we did, it was about silly things like whose turn it was to do the dishes, or whether we should paint the guest room blue or green. I never once suspected Logan could be hiding anything from me. Why would I? He was always home for dinner, always answered his phone, always seemed completely devoted to me and our life together. The last normal day of my life started like any other. Logan kissed me goodbye, said he had some paperwork to finish at the office, and promised to pick up Thai food for dinner. I remember thinking how lucky I was, how blessed our life was. I was heating up leftover lasagna when I heard Logan's key in the lock. So much for the promised Thai food, I thought with a smile. But when the door opened, the container of leftovers nearly slipped from my hands. Logan stood in our doorway, but he wasn't alone. In his arms was Tommy, Brittany's son, his little head resting on Logan's shoulder. The boy was clutching his favorite stuffed giraffe, the one I'd given him for his 3rd birthday just 2 months ago. "Logan?" My voice came out barely above a whisper. "What's going on? Where's Brittany?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked to our couch and sat down, still holding Tommy, who had fallen asleep during what I assumed was the car ride home. The sight was so domestic, so natural, and yet something felt terribly wrong. "We need to talk," Logan finally said, his voice rough. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "You're scaring me." I perched on the edge of our coffee table, facing them both. "Why do you have Tommy? Did something happen to Brittany?" He took a deep breath, and in that moment, I knew whatever he was about to say would change everything. "She died, 2 weeks ago. Cancer." His voice cracked. "She'd been fighting it for the past 6 months. Tommy, he's my son, Isabella." The words hit me like a physical blow. I stood up so quickly, I knocked over a framed photo on the coffee table. The crash of breaking glass made Tommy stir, but he didn't wake up. "What did you just say?" My voice sounded strange to my own ears. "Brittany and it was a long time ago. It didn't last long, I swear. I never loved her, It was a mistake, a stupid mistake." "A long time ago?" I felt like I was watching myself from outside my body as I did the math. "Tommy just turned 3. We were already married." Logan flinched. "I know, and I'm so sorry. But Isabella, you have to understand." "Understand what?" I cut him off. "That you cheated on me? That you've been lying to me for years? That I've been babysitting your secret child at our dinner parties?" Please keep your voice down, he pleaded, glancing at Tommy. Look, I know this is a shock. But there's more we need to discuss. Tommy's grandparents, they're not in a position to raise him. I'm his father. I need to step up. What exactly are you saying? I've decided to take full custody of Tommy. His grandparents agreed. And I want us, you and me, to raise him together. I stared at my husband of 4 years. Brittany, single mom. She'd never been a single mom at all. She'd been my husband's mistress, raising his child right under my nose, letting me babysit him, accepting my birthday gifts, sitting at my dinner table. No. The word came out quietly at first, then gained strength as I repeated it. No, Logan. Absolutely not. He shifted Tommy to his other shoulder, his face hardening. What do you mean, no? I mean, I'm not doing this. I'm not raising this child. I can't believe you'd even ask me to. Can't believe I'd ask you? Logan's voice took on an edge I'd never heard before. Isabella, you've been taking care of him since he was a baby. You love him, I've seen it. I loved a lie. I was struggling to keep my voice down. I took care of him because I thought he was your coworker's son. Because I felt sorry for what I thought was a single mother. Every moment, every interaction was based on a lie you told me. Tommy stirred in Logan's arms, and he stood up, starting to pace. Look, I know you're upset about how you found out. But think about this rationally. We've been trying to have a baby for years with no success. The casual cruelty of his words felt like a slap. Excuse me? Let's be honest, we don't even know if you can have children. He continued pacing, his voice taking on a persuasive tone that made my skin crawl. Remember all those conversations we had about adoption? About how there are children out there who need homes? Don't you dare, I hissed. Don't you dare use that against me. I'm not using anything against you. I'm being practical. We were going to adopt anyway. Here's a child who already knows us, who already loves you. And he's my son, Isabella, my flesh and blood. As opposed to some strange, unfamiliar child from an orphanage? Is that what you're saying? Well, yes. Logan stopped pacing, his frustration evident. Wouldn't this be better? A child we already know? Think about it, this is the perfect solution for our family. I let out a laugh that sounded more like a sob. Our family? Our family was built on lies, Logan. Every moment of the last 4 years has been a lie. That's not true. I love you, Isabella. I've always loved you. Just not enough to be faithful. Not enough to be honest. I stood up straight, something hardening inside me. I want you to leave. Take your son and go. You can't be serious. Logan's face darkened. This is my home too. No, it's not. My voice was steady now, cold. This apartment belonged to my grandmother. She left it to me in her will. Or did you forget that convenient little detail while you were making your plans? Isabella, be reasonable. I am being reasonable. I'm giving you time to pack your things before I call a lawyer. I walked to our bedroom, my bedroom now, and pulled out his suitcase from under the bed. You have 2 hours. You're making a huge mistake, he called after me. You're letting anger cloud your judgment. Think about Tommy. I am thinking about Tommy, I replied, wheeling the suitcase into the living room. I'm thinking his father is a liar who cheated on his wife and let her babysit his illegitimate child for 3 years without a shred of remorse. I'm thinking he deserves better than that. The next 2 hours passed in a blur of silent packing and muffled conversations as Logan made phone calls, probably to his mother, I thought bitterly. Tommy woke up confused and crying at one point, and I had to leave the room. I couldn't bear to look at him, knowing now why his eyes seemed so familiar. They were Logan's eyes. Finally, Logan stood at the door, suitcase in one hand, sleeping Tommy in the other. He turned to me one last time. This isn't over, Isabella. I didn't respond. I just closed and locked the door behind them, then slid down to sit on the floor, my whole body shaking. I was still sitting on the floor when my phone started ringing. Logan's mother's name flashed across the screen. For a moment, I considered not answering, but I knew Linda well enough to know she wouldn't stop calling. "How dare you?" Her voice hit me before I could even say hello. "How dare you throw my son and grandson out on the street like common criminals?" I pressed my fingertips to my temples, feeling a headache building. "Linda. Don't you Linda me. I've never been so disappointed in anyone in my entire life." She was practically screeching now. "What happened to the vows you took? For better or for worse, do those words mean nothing to you? You want to talk about vows?" My voice rose to match hers. "How about forsaking all others? Did Logan forget that part when he was sleeping with his coworker?" "My son is going through a tragedy." Linda's voice cracked with emotion. "The mother of his child just died, Isabella. Where's your compassion? Where's your humanity?" I let out a bitter laugh. "My humanity? What about Logan's humanity when he watched me babysit his secret child for 3 years? What about his humanity when he let me comfort Brittany about being a single mother when he knew the truth?" "You're being selfish," Linda spat. "All you can think about is yourself. This isn't about you, it's about an innocent child who just lost his mother." "No, this is absolutely about me." I stood up, pacing the apartment as I spoke. "Your son cheated on me. He lied to me for years. And you know what's really interesting? If Brittany hadn't died, I bet he would have kept right on lying." "Did you know too?" There was a telling pause on the other end of the line. "Oh my God." My legs went weak. "You knew this whole time." "Isabella, please." Her voice turned placating. "Try to understand. What good would it have done to tell you? The past is the past. What matters now is that sweet little boy needs a mother." "Stop," I cut her off. "Just stop. You don't get to play the sympathy card now. Not after years of lying to my face. These things happen, Isabella." Linda's voice took on a reasonable tone that made my blood boil. "Men make mistakes. The important thing is that Logan loves you. He chose you. And that little boy needs you. You've always wanted a child. I'm divorcing your son. I've already made up my mind." "Isabella, don't be hasty. Think about what you're doing. Think about Tommy." "Goodbye, Linda." I hung up the phone and blocked her number in one swift motion. Then I slid down the wall again, hugging my knees to my chest as the tears finally came. After blocking Linda's number, I did what any daughter would do in a crisis. I called my parents. My hands were shaking as I dialed, but I knew Mom and Dad would understand. "Hi, sweetie." Mom's voice was warm, and I nearly broke down at the sound of it. "Linda just called us." My heart sank. "Mom, let me explain." "Isabella, darling, you're overreacting." Her tone shifted from warm to lecturing in an instant. "These things happen in marriages. You need to be more understanding." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. "Overreacting? Mom, Logan cheated on me. And? Men stray sometimes, Isabella. It's not the end of the world." She sighed like I was being particularly dense. "The important thing is he came clean and wants to make it right." "Came clean?" I was practically choking on the words. "He only told me because Brittany died. He had no choice." "Well, maybe this is a blessing in disguise." Mom's voice took on that practical tone she used when she thought she was being helpful. "Let's be honest, sweetheart, you haven't been able to give him children. At least now you have a chance to be a mother." The casual cruelty of her words left me breathless. "Did you really just call me infertile?" "I'm being realistic. You're not getting any younger, and here's a child who needs a mother. You should be grateful for the opportunity." "Grateful?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Grateful that my husband cheated on me and hid his illegitimate child for 3 years? Oh, stop being so dramatic." Mom clucked her tongue. "Almost every husband cheats at some point. You don't throw away a marriage over it. Think about that poor little boy, he just lost his mother. I can't believe this. I ran a hand through my hair, tugging at the roots in frustration. My own mother is telling me to just accept that my husband cheated on me? I'm telling you to be practical. If you divorce Logan over this, I'll take this apartment away from you. Let Logan and the baby have their. That apartment was left to me by Grandma. I cut her off, my voice ice cold. You have no say in what happens to it. Isabella Marie Thompson, don't you dare take that tone with me. I am your mother. And this is my life, my marriage, my home. I took a deep breath. And my decision. I'm divorcing Logan. If you do this, don't expect any support from us, Mom snapped. Your father and all our relatives are on Logan's side. We raised you better than to abandon a child in need. No, you raised me to have self-respect. Or at least I thought you did. I felt eerily calm now. Goodbye, Mom. I ended the call and immediately blocked her number too. Then I went through my contacts and blocked my father, my sister, my aunts and uncles, anyone who might try to pressure me into changing my mind. 3 days later, I made the mistake of checking Facebook. Logan's post was the first thing I saw. Never thought I'd be writing this, but my wife of 4 years just threw me and my 3-year-old son out onto the street. My boy just lost his mother to cancer, and now we're basically homeless because my wife refuses to show any compassion. We're currently staying in a hotel, trying to figure out our next move. I guess you never really know someone until tragedy strikes. The comments were exactly what you'd expect. How could she be so heartless? That poor little boy. What kind of woman throws out a child who just lost his mother? I slammed my laptop shut, but not before seeing that he'd tagged mutual friends and family members. My phone started buzzing with text messages almost immediately. The notifications kept coming, splitting pretty evenly between support and condemnation. I ignored them all, too busy remembering something I'd almost forgotten. The prenup. Logan and I had signed it 4 years ago, laughing the whole time. My grandmother had insisted she wouldn't leave me the apartment unless I protected it legally. We'd added all sorts of ridiculous clauses, just for fun, treating it like a game. Except one clause wasn't funny anymore. I dug through my filing cabinet until I found it. There it was, in black and white. In the event of proven infidelity, the cheating spouse agrees to pay damages of $100,000 to the wronged party. We'd joked about it at the time. Better not catch you cheating, I'd teased Logan. As if I'd ever, he'd replied, signing with a flourish. I took photos of the prenup and texted them to Logan, along with screenshots of his Facebook post where he'd admitted Tommy was his son. His response came within minutes, "You can't be serious." "Dead serious," I typed back. "You admitted to the affair publicly. Tommy's birth certificate will prove the timing. The prenup is legally binding." My phone rang almost immediately, Linda again, calling from a different number. "You money-grubbing snake," she shrieked as soon as I answered. "How dare you try to extort my son? He's a single father now." "No, he's a cheater who got caught," I replied calmly. "And everything I'm doing is perfectly legal. Your son signed the agreement." "It was a joke." "You know it was a joke." "The notary who witnessed it didn't think it was a joke. Neither did the lawyer who drew it up." I examined my nails, feeling strangely detached. Maybe Logan should have thought about consequences before he cheated. "You heartless, mercenary bitch," Linda spat. "Is this what it's all about? Money?" "No, Linda. It's about justice. But the money's a nice bonus." I hung up and blocked her new number, then called my lawyer. A week into the separation, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something. Everyone kept talking about poor Logan, struggling to raise Tommy alone, but something didn't add up. I needed to hear from the one group of people who might actually know the truth, Brittany's parents. I called my friend who'd worked with Brittany at a previous job. And an hour later, I had the number for Mr. and Mrs. Anderson. My hand trembled as I dialed, unsure what reception to expect. After all, I was the wife of the man their daughter had an affair with. "Hello, Mrs. Anderson? This is Isabella Thompson, Logan's wife." There was a pause, and I braced myself for anger or hostility. Instead, I heard a gentle sigh. "Isabella, yes, we've been hoping you might call." Mrs. Anderson's voice was surprisingly warm. "I'm so sorry you had to find out about everything this way. I just need to understand some things," I admitted. "About Tommy's future." "Ah," Mrs. Anderson said softly. "You're wondering about the arrangements." "We would have taken Tommy ourselves," Mr. Anderson added, "but Brittany was very specific in her will. She left everything, her savings, her house, her life insurance, to Tommy, with Logan as his guardian. She wanted to make sure they'd be taken care of." I felt like I'd been doused with cold water. "Everything?" "Yes, dear. The house alone is worth close to $500,000. Plus her savings and the insurance payout. Logan and Tommy will be very comfortable." The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. Logan had been playing the penniless single father while sitting on a small fortune. And Linda had known. She'd been trying to manipulate me into dropping the lawsuit, counting on me not finding out about Brittany's will. "Mrs. Anderson," I said slowly, "thank you. You've helped me more than you know." "Isabella," she called just before I hung up. "For what it's worth. Brittany regretted what she did to you. At the end, she talked about coming clean, making things right. But Logan, he always insisted on keeping it quiet." "Of course he did. Why admit to one lie when you could just keep piling on more?" I ended the call and sat in my quiet apartment, feeling more certain than ever about my decision to divorce Logan. He hadn't changed at all. He was still the same calculating liar he'd always been, using Tommy to manipulate everyone's sympathies while hiding Brittany's inheritance. Well, let him keep his secrets and his money. I just wanted out. The court date arrived on a crisp autumn morning. I sat with my lawyer on one side of the courtroom, while Logan and his attorney took the other. He'd shaved and worn his best suit, clearly going for the sympathetic single father image. "Your Honor," Logan's lawyer began, "my client is a recently widowed father, struggling to provide for his 3-year-old son. This vindictive lawsuit from his estranged wife threatens to destroy what little stability he's managed to create." I watched Logan hang his head, playing his part perfectly. But this time, we were ready. "If I may, Your Honor," my lawyer interrupted, standing with a stack of documents. "We have evidence that Mr. Thompson's claims of financial hardship are significantly misrepresented." The next hour was like watching a house of cards collapse. My lawyer methodically presented the documentation from Brittany's parents, the will, the property deed, the life insurance policy, all of it. With each revelation, Logan's face grew paler. "So, Mr. Thompson," the judge peered over her glasses, "you inherited a house worth $480,000, savings of $175,000, and a life insurance payout of $250,000, yet you've been claiming financial hardship?" Logan squirmed in his seat. "Your Honor, those funds are for my son's future." "Your son's future seems well provided for," the judge cut him off. "What concerns me is the pattern of deception evident in this case." The ruling came swiftly. The prenuptial agreement was upheld, and Logan was ordered to pay the $100,000 infidelity clause. The judge also had choice words about his attempts to mislead the court about his financial situation. As we left the courthouse, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "I hope you're happy with yourself. You've destroyed your family over pride." I deleted the message without responding. My parents hadn't spoken to me directly since I filed for divorce, communicating only through disappointed texts and third-party messages about how cruel and unforgiving I was being. They'd chosen their side, and apparently, honesty wasn't on it. That was 6 months ago. Life has settled into a new normal now. The apartment feels bigger, quieter, but also cleaner somehow, like finally airing out a room that had been closed up too long. Sarah, my mutual friend with Logan, keeps me updated about Logan and Tommy, even though I've never asked. They're living in Brittany's house now. Tommy's started preschool. Logan's dating again. Sometimes, late at night, I think about Tommy and feel a pang of something. Not regret exactly, but sadness for what could have been in a different world, one where trust wasn't broken and lies weren't told. But then I remember all the deception, all the manipulation, and I know I made the right choice. I got a card from Linda last week, some long-winded plea about forgiveness and family and moving forward. I added it to the growing pile of unopened mail from various family members who suddenly want to bridge the gap. They all talk about forgiveness like it's a simple choice, like trust isn't as fragile as glass and twice as sharp when it breaks. The money from the lawsuit sits untouched in a separate account. I'm alone now, yes. But I'm free. Free from lies, free from manipulation, free from the suffocating weight of other people's expectations. And in that freedom, I'm finally starting to breathe again. Some people call it cruel, walking away from a child who'd lost his mother. But sometimes the kindest thing you can do, for yourself and for others, is to remove yourself from a situation built on lies. Tommy has his father, his grandparents, and a secure future. And I have my truth. That's enough. I never imagined I'd be telling this story, but sometimes life takes unexpected turns that force you to share the darkest moments of your past. I'm Julia, and until recently, I lived what many would consider a dream life. My husband Max and I owned a beautiful house. The kind with a wraparound porch and windows that caught the sunset just right. I loved my job as a college science teacher. There was something deeply satisfying about watching young minds grasp complex concepts for the first time. Max would often tease me about how animated I'd get when talking about my students' breakthroughs. He'd say, "Jules, your eyes light up more talking about chemical reactions than they do when you look at me." Max was successful in his own right. He owned a real estate agency that had grown impressively over the years. He had a natural talent for the business, understanding both properties and people in a way that made him stand out in the industry. "It's simple," he'd say. "Just treat people the way you'd want to be treated." If only everyone in our lives shared that philosophy. Our family circle was relatively small. My father, a lawyer, lived in another state, which meant our visits were limited to major holidays and the occasional long weekend. On Max's side, there was his father Jack, also a lawyer, and his sister Daisy. And Daisy, well, she was something else entirely. I remember the first time I met her. She swept into the restaurant where Max had arranged our introduction, designer handbag swinging from her arm, fresh from finalizing her second divorce. "Another one bites the dust," she'd announced, laughing as she ordered the most expensive wine on the menu. "But don't worry, sweetie, he's paying for it all." That was Daisy's approach to life: marry rich, divorce richer. She managed to do it 3 times, each marriage more lucrative than the last. Well, almost. The first 2 divorces left her with hefty alimony payments, which she burned through in record time. Designer clothes, exotic vacations, spa treatments, nothing was too expensive for Daisy. "Life's too short to count pennies," she'd say, swiping a credit card that was probably already maxed out. But her third marriage? That's where her luck ran out. Her husband was smarter than the others, or at least had better lawyers. He had her sign a prenuptial agreement that she probably didn't even read. When that marriage ended, Daisy was left with nothing but her expensive tastes and an empty bank account. That's when Max stepped in. "She's my sister, Jules," he'd say whenever I questioned why we were paying her rent. "I can't just let her live on the street." So he covered her apartment, her utilities, most of her bills. I watched month after month as my husband supported his sister's lifestyle, unable to say no to family. Living with Daisy as a sister-in-law was like walking on eggshells, except the eggshells were designer brands and covered in champagne. From the moment I entered the family, there was tension between us that you could cut with a knife. "Oh, look who's here, our favorite professor," Daisy would announce whenever I walked into a room, her voice dripping with mockery. coming to teach us all how to live properly? I never understood why she took such pleasure in antagonizing me. Maybe it was because I represented everything she despised: hard work, education, earning your own way in life. The tension would reach its peak at family gatherings, especially once Daisy had a few drinks in her. I remember one particularly uncomfortable Christmas party. Daisy was on her fourth martini, holding court in the living room like some self-proclaimed queen of cunning. "You want to know how to really succeed in life," she announced to everyone and no one in particular. "Watch and learn from a master." "Daisy, maybe you should slow down," Max suggested gently. "Oh, hush, little brother," she waved him off. "I'm educating your wife here. See, Julia, you spent all those years getting your fancy degree, and for what? I've never worked a day in my life, and I've had more luxury than you'll ever see." She loved telling stories about her conquests, especially when she was drinking. "Any man I want," she'd boast, throwing back another martini. "I could take any man right out of his happy little family. Done it twice already. It's like taking candy from a baby." The worst part was watching other people at these gatherings, especially younger women, actually listening to her like she was sharing some ancient wisdom. "You don't need books, honey," she'd say to anyone who'd listen. "You need strategy. These rich men? They're all the same. Wave a pretty face at them, and they'll forget their own names." Looking back, I should have seen the warning signs in how she talked about manipulation like it was an art form. "Remember me in my 20s, Max?" she'd often reminisce. "I had them all wrapped around my finger. One smile, and their wallets would open like magic." The thing is, she wasn't lying about her past beauty. I'd seen the old photos. Daisy in her prime was stunning. The kind of beauty that turned heads and stopped conversations. She'd weaponized it early, learned to use it like a master craftsman uses their tools. I chose to deal with her the only way I knew how, with distance. When she'd start her usual routine about how education was for suckers and how she was smarter than all the working people combined, I'd simply excuse myself from the room. No confrontations, no lectures, no attempts to change her mind. What would have been the point? "Running away again, Julia?" she'd call after me sometimes. "Don't you want to hear about how real women get ahead in life?" Max would try to smooth things over, always playing the peacekeeper. "She's just joking, Jules," he'd say. "You know how she gets when she's had a few drinks." But I knew better. Daisy wasn't joking. That Wednesday started like any other. I was grading papers in the living room while Daisy had dropped by unannounced, as usual, complaining about her latest dating disaster. "I'm telling you, Julia, the quality of rich men in this city has really gone downhill," she was saying when my phone rang. The hospital's number flashing on my screen made my heart stop. "Mrs. Harrison?" The voice on the other end was professionally detached. "This is Memorial Hospital. Your husband has been in an accident." I don't remember dropping my phone. I just remember Daisy's face changing as she watched my reaction. For once, her usual smirk was gone, replaced by what looked like genuine concern. "What is it? What happened to Max?" she demanded, grabbing my arm. "Hospital, accident," was all I could manage to say. "I'm driving," Daisy announced, snatching her car keys. The ride to the hospital was a blur. I kept catching glimpses of Daisy's face in the rearview mirror. She looked agitated, her hands gripping the steering wheel so tight her knuckles were white. The emergency room was chaos, people rushing everywhere, phones ringing, monitors beeping. We ran to the reception desk, both of us talking over each other until the nurse held up her hand to stop us. "Mrs. Harrison?" she asked, looking at me with those eyes, those terrible, sympathetic eyes that medical staff get when they're about to destroy your world. "Please, come with me." The words that followed didn't seem real. Everything possible, massive internal injuries, didn't make it. Each phrase was like a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. I stood there, frozen, until a clipboard was pushed into my hands. Forms. Always forms. Even when your world is ending, there are forms to fill out. "Daisy, I managed to say, my voice sounding strange and distant to my own ears. Could you get Max's things from the administrator? I need to sign these. She nodded, squeezing my arm before heading down the hallway. I spent the next 15 minutes mechanically signing papers, my signature becoming less recognizable with each page. When I finally finished and went to find Daisy, I spotted her in a quiet corner of the waiting room. Something about her movements made me stop. She was hunched over Max's personal effects, but this wasn't the behavior of a grieving sister. Her movements were quick, furtive, like a thief. I instinctively stepped behind a corner, watching as she rifled through my dead husband's wallet. My blood ran cold as I saw her pull out his bank card, glance around nervously, and slip it into her designer handbag. This wasn't just another example of Daisy's moral flexibility, this was something darker, something unforgivable. Standing there in that sterile hospital corridor, watching her tuck away that stolen piece of plastic with practiced ease, I realized I was seeing the real Daisy for the first time. The pieces suddenly clicked into place in my mind. Max's habit of using his father's birthday for all his passwords and pins, a detail Daisy had mocked him about countless times over the years. Really, Max, she'd teased at his last birthday party, watching him punch in the code to his new phone. Still using Dad's birthday for everything? You're so predictable. Now that predictable habit was exactly what she was counting on. My mind raced with the implications of what I'd just witnessed. But I couldn't act rashly, not with something this serious. I needed legal advice, and I knew exactly who to ask. Taking a deep breath to steady myself, I stepped out from my hiding place and approached Daisy as if I hadn't seen anything. Ready to go? I asked, proud of how steady I kept my voice. Oh, Jules. Daisy jumped slightly, clutching her bag closer. Yes, let's get out of this awful place. The drive home was surreal. Daisy kept up a stream of apparently concerned chatter, occasionally wiping away tears that never quite seemed to reach her designer mascara. I just can't believe he's gone, she kept saying. My little brother, what am I going to do without him? What are you going to do without his money? I wanted to scream. Instead, I gripped the steering wheel tighter and focused on breathing. As soon as we pulled into my driveway, Daisy's act began to crack. She barely made it through the front door before she started gathering her things. I'm so sorry, Julia, but I have some really important things I need to take care of, she said, not quite meeting my eyes. You understand, don't you? It's just, I need to process this in my own way. I bet you do, I thought, watching her practically sprint to her car. The screech of her tires on the pavement had barely faded when I grabbed my phone and dialed Jack's number. Julia, his familiar voice answered on the second ring. I just heard about Max. I'm so sorry, I'm already packing to drive down. Jack, I cut him off, my voice shaking. Something happened at the hospital. Something you need to know about. I took a deep breath. It's about Daisy. What has she done now? The weariness in his voice told me he was already expecting the worst. I saw her steal Max's credit card. Right there in the hospital, just minutes after we found out he was. I couldn't finish the sentence. She thinks she can use it because she knows his PIN. Jack, I watched your daughter rob her own dead brother. The sound of Jack's heavy sigh through the phone seemed to fill my empty house. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of years of disappointment. Julia, he said slowly, I've spent my entire career defending people in trouble, but I never thought my own daughter would. He paused, and I could hear him struggling to maintain his composure. This time she's gone too far. Stealing from her own brother, and not just stealing, doing it while his body was barely cold. I don't know what to do, Jack, I admitted, sinking into Max's favorite armchair. The leather still held his scent. First, you need to understand something, Jack's lawyer voice took over. Legally, you're Max's sole heir. Every account, every asset, it all belongs to you now. But this situation, it's more complicated than simple theft. I sat up straighter. What do you mean? The card she took, it's a credit card, isn't it? When I confirmed this, he continued, that makes this much more serious. If she uses that card, she's not just stealing from family, she's committing credit card fraud. That's a federal offense, Julia. She could go to prison for this. The gravity of the situation hit me like a physical blow. Prison? I hadn't thought about that. My daughter, Jack's voice cracked slightly, has done many questionable things in her life. I've watched her manipulate and scheme her way through 3 marriages. I've seen her take advantage of Max's generosity time and time again. But this, stealing from her dead brother, she needs to learn a lesson. A real one this time. I twisted my wedding ring nervously. What should we do? Here's what I propose, Jack said after a moment's thought. We wait 2 weeks. Give her a chance to come to her senses. Maybe she'll realize what she's done. Maybe she'll return the card and beg for forgiveness. If she does that, we can handle this within the family. And if she doesn't? Then we go to the police, he said firmly. I love my daughter, Julia, but sometimes love means letting people face the consequences of their actions. She's my child, but Max was my child too, and what she's done, it's unforgivable. We sat in silence for a moment, both lost in our thoughts. Finally, I asked, 2 weeks then? 2 weeks, Jack confirmed. But Julia, knowing my daughter, I wouldn't hold my breath for a happy ending. She's never shown remorse before. I doubt she'll start now. The day of Max's funeral was surreal. The church was packed with people whose faces blurred together in my grief. I sat in the front row, numb, while a steady stream of mourners offered their condolences. But what really turned my stomach was Daisy's performance. She had dressed perfectly for the role of the grieving sister, black designer dress, tastefully smudged mascara, a delicate handkerchief that she dabbed at her eyes with theatrical precision. Every few minutes, she would break into fresh sobs, particularly when someone new arrived. He was the best brother anyone could ask for, she wailed to a group of Max's business associates. He always took care of me. Always looked out for his big sister. I don't know how I'll go on without him. I caught Jack's eye across the room. His jaw was clenched so tight I could see the muscles working beneath his skin. We both watched as Daisy worked the crowd, moving from group to group, sharing tearful stories about her beloved baby brother. Remember when Max bought me my first car? She sniffled to one of his old college friends. That's just the kind of person he was, always giving, always generous. The irony of her words made me feel physically ill. Jack and I maintained our silence, playing our parts in this macabre theater. What choice did we have? We couldn't exactly cause a scene at Max's funeral. The following 2 weeks were the longest of my life. I tried to keep busy with work, but my mind kept drifting to that credit card. Part of me, the part that wanted to believe in basic human decency, hoped that Daisy wouldn't actually use it. Maybe she had just panicked at the hospital. Maybe she'd come to her senses. Maybe she'd return it with an apology. People can surprise you, I told myself late at night, alone in our too-big house. Maybe she's better than we think. Finally, after exactly 14 days, I walked into the bank. The teller's sympathetic smile as she pulled up the account made my heart sink even before she handed me the statement. My hand shook as I read through the transactions. $32,499 at Luxury Motors. $5,000 at Divine Aesthetics Plastic Surgery Consultation. $2,700 at Gucci. $1,850 at Louis Vuitton. $890 at La Maison Restaurant. The list went on and on, each line item a fresh slap in the face. Over $50,000 in total, spent in a 2-week shopping spree that would have made a Kardashian blush. I sat in my car in the bank parking lot, staring at the statement until the numbers blurred. Then I pulled out my phone and typed out a text to Daisy. Hey, haven't heard from you in a while. Would love to catch up. Coffee at Riverside Cafe tomorrow at 2? Her response came almost immediately, of course, missing you too. The little heart emoji at the end of her message made my blood boil. I called Jack next. Did you get the statement? He asked without preamble. Yes. I'm meeting her tomorrow at Riverside Cafe. Will you come? Try to stop me, he replied grimly. It's time we showed Daisy exactly what kind of hole she's dug for herself. The Riverside Cafe was quiet that afternoon, just a few scattered customers nursing their lattes. I'd chosen a corner table, away from prying eyes and eager ears. Jack sat beside me, his legal notepad placed precisely in front of him, the bank statement tucked underneath. When Daisy swept in, 15 minutes late as usual, she was wearing new clothes I now knew had been purchased with Max's stolen credit card. Her face fell slightly when she saw her father, but she recovered quickly, plastering on her practiced smile. "Daddy, what a surprise," she exclaimed, leaning down to kiss his cheek. He turned his face away. That's when I saw the first flicker of uncertainty cross her features. "Sit down, Daisy," Jack said, his voice carrying the weight of 30 years on the bench. "What's going on?" she asked, sliding into the chair across from us. "Why do I feel like I'm being ambushed?" I took a deep breath. Something happened at the hospital the day Max died. His credit card was stolen. The color drained from Daisy's face, but she recovered quickly. Her eyes went wide with manufactured outrage. "Stolen? Oh my God, that's horrible. It must have been one of those shifty doctors or nurses. You can't trust anyone these days." "Really, Daisy?" I said quietly. "That's the story you're going with?" "What do you mean?" Her voice rose an octave. Are you actually suggesting that I would steal from my own brother? On the day he died? How dare you? I loved Max. I would never. Jack cut her off by sliding the bank statement across the table. "Then perhaps you'd like to explain how the thief knew to buy exactly your size at Gucci? Or how they knew to make an appointment at your favorite plastic surgeon?" Daisy stared at the statement, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Then, like a cornered animal, she changed tactics. "Okay, fine, I took the card. But it was Max's debit card. I'm entitled to some of his money. I'm his sister. I just took what would have come to me anyway. Nothing terrible happened here." Jack slammed his hand on the table, making the coffee cups rattle. Several heads turned our way, but he didn't seem to notice. "Nothing terrible?" he hissed. "Daisy, that wasn't a debit card. It wasn't Max's money you were spending. It was a credit card. Do you understand what that means? You didn't steal from your brother's estate, you committed credit card fraud. That's a federal offense." I watched as the reality of her situation finally began to sink in. The color drained from her face again, but this time it didn't come back. "Federal? What do you mean federal?" Her voice had lost its defensive edge, replaced by the first real fear I'd ever heard from her. "I mean prison time," Jack said flatly. "Serious prison time." "No," Daisy whispered, shaking her head. No, Daddy, please. I didn't know. I'll fix it. I'll sell the car. I'll return the clothes. I'll get the money back somehow. Please, you have to help me. You always help me." "Not this time," Jack replied, his voice heavy with finality. "I've spent your entire life cleaning up your messes. Max spent years supporting you, protecting you, making excuses for you. And how do you repay that loyalty? By stealing from him before his body was even cold." The legal proceedings moved faster than I expected. Within months of filing the police report and contacting the bank's fraud department, Daisy was standing in court, facing the consequences of her actions for the first time in her life. Gone were the designer clothes and perfectly styled hair. She looked small in her navy blue pantsuit, her face bare of makeup, as she stood before the judge. For once, her tears weren't part of an act. "Your Honor," the prosecutor said, "this wasn't a crime of necessity or desperation. Ms. Harrison stole her deceased brother's credit card within hours of his death, before his body was even cold. She then proceeded to spend over $50,000 in a calculated spending spree, showing complete disregard for both the law and basic human decency. The sentence came down like a hammer: 7 years in federal prison. I watched Daisy collapse into her lawyer's arms, sobbing uncontrollably. Part of me wanted to feel something, pity, perhaps, or sadness. But I felt nothing except a grim sense of justice. Late at night, though, when the house is quiet and I'm alone with my thoughts, I sometimes question whether we did the right thing. 7 years is a long time. Did we go too far? Was there another way? But then I remember finding her rifling through Max's wallet in that hospital corridor. I remember how she spent that money without a second thought, shopping, dining, buying a new car while I was planning her brother's funeral. I remember every time Max defended her, supported her, loved her unconditionally, and how she repaid that love with theft and betrayal. In those moments, I know we made the right choice. Some actions can't be excused, some bridges can't be rebuilt, some betrayals cut too deep to heal. Jack and I still meet regularly for Sunday brunches. We rarely talk about Daisy anymore, there's nothing left to say. Instead, we share memories of Max and support each other through the grief. 3 months into her sentence, Daisy called me from prison. The collect call notification gave me pause, but something made me accept it. "Julia?" Her voice was small, broken. "I'm so sorry. Please, I know I messed up. I know what I did was unforgivable. But please, can we talk? I need someone. Everyone has abandoned me." I thought about Max, about his generous heart and forgiving nature. For a moment, I almost wavered. But then I remembered the security footage the police had shown us, Daisy using his credit card at store after store, smiling, laughing, living it up while we grieved. "You're right about one thing, Daisy," I said quietly. "What you did was unforgivable. Don't call me again." I hung up and blocked the prison's number. Some people say time heals all wounds, that forgiveness sets you free. Maybe they're right. But some betrayals go beyond forgiveness, some actions destroy any possibility of redemption. My name is Sarah, I'm 28, and I work as a nurse at Memorial Hospital. My husband Henry is 31 and manages operations at a local logistics company. We've been married for 3 years and live in a small but comfortable house that we've made our own. Well, at least it was supposed to be our own. The source of all our problems? Ashley, Henry's younger sister. She's 10 years his junior and, to put it bluntly, she's a handful. While most people her age are finishing college or starting careers, Ashley bounces from job to job like it's a sport. She didn't even bother with college, claiming studying wasn't her thing. Instead, she spends most of her time partying with friends and, more importantly, spending money she doesn't have. "Henry, I'm totally broke again," her voice would crackle through the phone, sometimes multiple times in a single day. "Can you help me out with groceries?" Or, "Big brother, my phone's about to get cut off. I need just a little help." And my personal favorite, "There's this amazing party tonight, and I have absolutely nothing to wear." Every single time, and I mean every time, Henry would cave. The amounts were never huge, but they added up, and Ashley never seemed to think about paying him back. Not that Henry ever asked. What really got under my skin was her habit of showing up unannounced at our house. She'd just waltz in and plop herself down on our couch like she owned the place, staying for hours on end. After a 12-hour shift at the hospital, the last thing I wanted was to come home to Ashley's endless chatter about her latest drama. "Can't you at least ask her to call before she comes over?" I asked Henry one evening after a particularly trying day. "Sarah, you don't understand," he'd say, his voice taking on that defensive tone I'd come to know all too well. "It's different for us. Mom worked double shifts most days, just to keep food on the table. I was all Ashley had growing up. I practically raised her myself." That was his go-to explanation for everything concerning Ashley. Their mother had worked herself to the bone to provide for them, often leaving Henry to take care of his baby sister. Now, it seemed like that responsibility had become permanently etched into his identity. Just when I thought I couldn't take another surprise visit or desperate phone call, Ashley dropped a bombshell that would change everything, or so I thought. "I'm engaged," she burst through our front door one Sunday afternoon, practically bouncing off the walls with excitement. "And guess what? We're moving out of state after the wedding." I tried my best to keep my expression neutral, but inside, I was doing cartwheels. Henry, of course, had a different reaction. "Out of state?" he asked, his voice wavering slightly. That's pretty far, Ashley." "Don't worry, big brother," she said, giving him one of those bear hugs she was famous for. "My fiancé Mark has an amazing job there, and we'll visit all the time." When we met Mark the following week, I was pleasantly surprised. He seemed like everything Ashley wasn't: responsible, level-headed, and most importantly, financially stable. He worked in software development and actually had a 5-year plan that didn't involve mooching off relatives. For the first time, I felt like maybe things were going to work out. The wedding came 3 months later. Despite my relief at the situation, I found myself getting caught up in the excitement. Henry and I went all out on their gift, a top-of-the-line home entertainment system that cost more than I care to admit. But hey, if it meant Ashley would be entertained in her own home instead of ours, it was worth every penny. The day they left for their new life in another state, I finally felt like I could breathe again. Our house was quiet, our evenings were our own, and our bank account was remarkably stable. Sure, Ashley would pop up on Skype calls now and then, but it was nothing compared to the constant presence we'd dealt with before. A year passed, and life fell into a comfortable rhythm. Then came the news that Ashley was pregnant. When she told us over Skype, her face glowing with happiness, I found myself genuinely sharing in her joy. Even Henry seemed more relaxed about his sister now that she had her own family to focus on. "They're doing really well," Henry said one night after a video call where Ashley had shown off her growing baby bump. "Mark got a promotion at work, they bought a new car, and the baby's room is already set up." "They are," I agreed, curling up next to him on the couch. "You did good, you know? You helped her get to where she needed to be." For the first time in years, everything felt perfect. Ashley was happy, Henry was content, and I had my husband back. If only I'd known then that this was just the calm before the storm. It was a Tuesday evening when my world turned upside down. I remember it clearly because I'd just finished a particularly exhausting shift at the hospital, 3 emergency cases back to back. All I wanted was to come home, take a hot shower, and maybe convince Henry to order takeout. Instead, I walked into what looked like a tornado had hit our living room. The first thing I saw was Ashley, lounging on our couch as if she'd never left, bouncing a 6-month-old baby on her knee. Her husband Mark sat next to her, engrossed in something on his phone. Henry was perched on the armchair, wearing the biggest grin I'd seen since their wedding day. The floor was littered with bags, baby toys were scattered everywhere, and our usually tidy coffee table was buried under a mountain of dirty dishes. I stood in the doorway, my work bag still slung over my shoulder, trying to process the scene before me. This had to be some kind of stress-induced hallucination, right? "Sarah," Ashley squealed, as if this was a totally normal situation. "Surprise! We're here. Mark got this amazing promotion offer at work, they want him to transfer to their office here. Can you believe it? It's like fate or something." Mark barely looked up from his phone, just giving a slight nod of confirmation. "We've always talked about moving closer to Henry," Ashley continued, not seeming to notice my stunned expression. "And when this opportunity came up, we just knew we had to jump on it. We'll stay here just until we find our own place. It won't be long, I promise." I glanced at Henry, hoping to see some sign that he was as blindsided by this as I was. Instead, he was beaming like a kid on Christmas morning. "Isn't it great, Sarah?" he said, practically bouncing in his seat. "Having everyone close by again." I mumbled something about needing to take a shower and escape to our bedroom. My mind was racing. Our house barely had enough space for 2 people, let alone 4 plus a baby. And knowing Ashley's track record with temporary arrangements, I had a sinking feeling about this whole situation. Later that night, after Ashley, Mark, and the baby had settled into our spare room, which was really more of a storage space with a futon, I confronted Henry in our bedroom. "You could have given me some warning," I said, trying to keep my voice down. "This is our home, Henry. Our space. We should have discussed this first." Henry sat on the edge of our bed, running his hands through his hair, something he always did when he was stressed. I know. But they just showed up. What was I supposed to do, turn them away?" "They're family, Sarah." "They're your family," I corrected him. "And yes, you could have at least called me before letting them move in." "It's only for a month or two," he assured me, though he wouldn't meet my eyes. "They just need time to find their own place. Ashley said Mark's new job pays really well, so they'll be able to afford something nice." I sighed heavily, knowing I was fighting a losing battle. 1 or 2 months, I repeated. "That's it. And they need to help out around the house." "Of course they will," Henry said quickly. "Ashley's grown up a lot since having the baby. You'll see, everything will work out fine." I agreed reluctantly, more to end the conversation than because I believed it. As I lay in bed that night, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of a baby crying in the next room, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just made a huge mistake. Life with our new house guests quickly settled into a routine, though not the kind I'd hoped for. While Ashley spent her days at home with the baby, Mark headed off to his new job, usually returning around 5 p.m. Henry would get home about an hour later, and I'd typically arrive last, usually around 7:30 after my extended hospital shifts. That first week, I tried to stay positive. "It's just an adjustment period," I kept telling myself. But as the days went by, my optimism crumbled faster than yesterday's leftover casserole, if there had been any leftovers, that is. Every evening, I'd open our front door to the same scene: chaos. Pure, unadulterated chaos. Dirty dishes would be piled so high in the sink that I couldn't even see the faucet. Baby toys created an obstacle course across our living room floor. Stray socks, burp cloths, and what looked like half of Ashley's wardrobe decorated every available surface. "Ashley?" I called out one particularly bad evening, carefully stepping over a trail of scattered Cheerios. "Have you been home all day?" "Yeah," she responded from the couch, scrolling through her phone while the baby played on a blanket nearby. "Why?" I bit my tongue, hard. The answer was everywhere, in the unwashed bottles cluttering the counter, in the overflowing diaper pail that no one had bothered to empty, in the general disaster zone that used to be my tidy home. Before they moved in, I had a system. I'd cook dinner every other night, making enough for leftovers so I could have a break the next evening. It was perfect: cook one day, relax the next. But now? Now I'd come home exhausted after a 12-hour shift of dealing with medical emergencies, open the refrigerator hoping to find yesterday's chicken stir-fry, and find nothing. Not even a stray bean sprout. "Oh yeah, that was really good," Ashley mentioned one evening when I stared into the empty fridge where my carefully prepared lasagna should have been. "Mark loved it too. You should make it again." "The worst part?" She said this while sitting on our couch, surrounded by empty takeout containers from her lunch, clearly not seeing any connection between my missing dinner and her obligation to contribute to the household. I closed the refrigerator door and leaned my forehead against it, trying to remember what it felt like to come home to peace and quiet, to a clean house, to food in the fridge. It felt like a distant dream now, replaced by this new reality where I was apparently running a hotel with full catering services, minus the paying guests, of course. After 2 weeks of living in this chaos, I finally snapped. It happened on a Thursday evening when I came home to find Ashley and Mark watching TV while their baby napped, surrounded by the day's worth of dishes, empty snack packets, and what looked like every baby toy they owned. "We need to talk," I said, switching off the TV. "All of us?" Ashley looked up at me like I'd just interrupted the most important moment of her life. "Hey, we were watching that." "This is more important," I insisted, taking a deep breath. "Look, if we're all going to live here together, we need some ground rules. Everyone needs to pitch in with the cooking and cleaning. Mark suddenly became very interested in his phone, while Ashley rolled her eyes. Sarah, come on. We're guests here. Guests? I couldn't help but laugh. Guests don't empty out the entire fridge. Guests don't leave their mess everywhere. Guests usually leave after a few days. This isn't even my house, Ashley shot back, her voice taking on that whiny tone I'd grown to hate. I'm not comfortable cooking in someone else's kitchen. It stopped being someone else's kitchen the moment you moved in here. You're living here, eating here, making messes here. You need to help maintain the house. I have a baby to take care of, Ashley protested, gesturing toward the nursery where her son was sleeping. I can't do everything. You're not doing anything. The words burst out before I could stop them. You're home all day, but you can't even wash a dish or throw together a simple dinner? Ashley's face crumpled into that familiar pre-crying expression I'd seen her use on Henry countless times. Right on cue, she jumped up and ran to find her brother, who had just gotten home and was changing out of his work clothes. Within minutes, Henry was in the living room, looking at me with that disappointed expression that made my blood boil. Sarah, can we talk privately? He asked, gesturing toward our bedroom. Once the door was closed, he turned to me. You can't talk to Ashley like that. She's struggling enough as it is. Struggling? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Henry, I work 12-hour shifts at the hospital. I deal with actual emergencies, sick people, life and death situations. Your sister sits at home all day watching TV and can't even be bothered to wash a coffee mug. She has a baby to take care of, Henry defended her, just as he always did. You don't know how hard that is. No, I don't know how hard it is to ignore your child while scrolling through social media all day, I snapped. But I do know how hard it is to come home after a long shift and have to clean up after 3 adults who apparently never learned how to use a dishwasher. Sarah, Henry sighed, running his hands through his hair. She's my sister. She has a baby. We have to help them. Just give it time. Everything will work out. I stared at him, suddenly feeling very tired. It was the same argument we'd been having since we got married, just with higher stakes now. Ashley would always come first, and I would always be expected to understand, to accommodate, to give in. Remember how I said Mark seemed like a responsible guy when we first met him? Well, add that to the growing list of things I've been wrong about lately. Turns out, he's just Ashley in male form, minus the constant begging for money, but with an extra helping of laziness. Every evening like clockwork, he'd come home from work, grab a beer from our fridge that he never replaced, and plant himself on our couch. The most exercise he got was lifting the TV remote or reaching for the game controller. Hey, Sarah, he called out one evening as I was making dinner. Could you grab me another beer while you're in there? I was in the middle of cooking dinner, again, while Ashley scrolled through her phone and he played some shooting game on his brand new gaming console. Yes, the same console he bought with his first paycheck at the new job, while still not contributing a single dollar to groceries or household expenses. The fridge is 10 feet away from you, Mark, I replied, stirring the pasta sauce with more force than necessary. I think you can manage. He didn't respond, just kept playing his game. The console must have cost at least $700, but heaven forbid they chip in for toilet paper. Living in such close quarters meant I was privy to every aspect of their lives, whether I wanted to be or not. Our house wasn't exactly built for 2 families, the walls were thin enough that I could hear everything that happened in their room. And I mean everything. The baby's crying was the worst part. He'd wake up almost every night, his wails echoing through the house. What followed was always the same. It's your turn, Ashley would groan. I have work tomorrow, Mark would snap back. So? I'd been with him all day. Then you should be used to it. Their arguments would escalate, voices rising until they were practically shouting, while their poor baby continued crying. Most nights, I'd lie awake, counting the minutes until either one of them finally gave in and attended to their child, or until the baby exhausted himself and fell back asleep. Just when I thought I couldn't take any more, a glimmer of hope appeared. I got approved for 3 days of vacation time. 3 blessed days away from the chaos, the mess, the constant noise. I'd already found a nice little bed and breakfast outside the city, and I was counting down the days until I could escape. But of course, Ashley had other plans. Sarah, she cornered me in the kitchen one morning, wearing that fake sweet smile I'd come to dread. "I heard you've got some time off coming up." I should have denied it. I should have run. Instead, I nodded. "That's perfect," she clapped her hands together. "Mark and I were hoping to visit my old friend from high school that weekend. You could watch the baby for us. I mean, you're a pediatric nurse, right? You're literally qualified for this." I stood there, coffee mug frozen halfway to my mouth, as she continued chattering. "We really need a break, Sarah. The baby's been so demanding lately, and I'm just exhausted. You understand, right? It's just 3 days, and you're already going to be off work anyway." "No," I said firmly. "Absolutely not. I've had these plans for weeks. I need this break." "Break from what?" Ashley scoffed. "All you do is work and come home. Try taking care of a baby all day." "All day? You mean when you're not watching TV or scrolling through Instagram?" The words came out sharp and fast. "I'm not canceling my vacation to babysit while you go party with your friends." The argument escalated quickly, with Ashley's voice rising to that shrill pitch that always gave me a headache. That's when Henry walked in, home early from work for once. "What's going on?" he asked, looking between us. "Your wife is being completely selfish." Ashley jumped in before I could speak. "I asked her for one tiny favor, and she's acting like I'm asking her to donate a kidney." I turned to Henry, certain that this one time, he'd see reason. "I have 3 days off, Henry. 3 days I was hoping to spend with you, away from." I gestured at the mess around us. "All of this. But your sister wants me to cancel everything to babysit while she goes on vacation." "Well," Henry shifted uncomfortably, and my heart sank. I knew that look. "Maybe we could help her out? She and Mark really could use a break." Something inside me snapped. "A break?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "What about my break? What about our break? When was the last time we had dinner together without your sister interrupting? When was the last time we could relax in our own home?" "Sarah, please," Henry started, but I was already moving. I walked straight to our bedroom, pulled out my suitcase, and started throwing clothes into it. My hands were shaking, but my mind was clear for the first time in weeks. "What are you doing?" Henry followed me, panic in his voice. "Taking my break," I replied, zipping up the suitcase. "You want to help your sister so badly? Fine, you can babysit, I'm done." I walked out of that house with nothing but my suitcase and car keys, ignoring Henry's calls behind me. The drive to my friend Lisa's vacation house took 2 hours. 2 hours of alternating between crying and feeling an overwhelming sense of relief. The next day, around noon, my phone rang. It was Henry. "Sarah, I'm so sorry." His voice was desperate. "Please come home." They left. "The baby's here with me. They said they were going to the store 3 hours ago. I've been calling and calling, but they won't answer. I don't know what to do." I closed my eyes, already knowing what was coming next. "Ashley's posting on Facebook," he continued, his voice breaking. "Pictures of them at some beach party. She wrote about how she needed this break from mom life and how she's finally feeling free again. Sarah, I can't do this alone. I was so wrong. I broke every speed limit on my way home. When I walked through our front door, the scene that greeted me was worse than I'd imagined. The house looked like it had been ransacked, dishes piled everywhere, baby clothes strewn across every surface, and in the middle of it all sat Henry, looking completely shell-shocked, trying unsuccessfully to comfort a screaming baby. "I don't know what he wants," Henry said, his voice cracking. "I've tried everything, feeding, changing, rocking. Taking the crying infant from my husband's trembling hands, I switched into nurse mode. Within 20 minutes, I had the baby fed, changed, and sleeping peacefully in his crib. Then I turned my attention to Henry, who looked like he hadn't slept in days. "Go take a shower," I told him gently. "I'll start cleaning up." It took hours to restore some semblance of order to our house. By the time I finished cooking a proper dinner, Henry looked more like himself again. We ate in silence, both exhausted but relieved to have a moment of peace. That peace was shattered 2 days later when Ashley and Mark burst through the door, tanned and laughing, loaded down with shopping bags. "Oh my God, you guys, we had the best time," Ashley gushed, not even glancing at her baby. "The beach was amazing, and there was this incredible club." "When are you moving out?" Henry's voice cut through Ashley's chatter like a knife. The room went silent. "What?" Ashley blinked at her brother. "We haven't even started looking yet. I mean, we've been so busy." "You have 2 days," Henry said, his voice eerily calm. 2 days to find a place and get out of our house." Ashley's face crumpled into her familiar crying routine. "You can't be serious. We're family. This is all because of her, isn't it?" She pointed at me accusingly. "She's turned you against me, your own sister." "No, Ashley." Henry stood up, and for the first time in his life, he looked truly angry with his sister. "This is because of you. You abandoned your child to go party. You've been taking advantage of me for years, and I let you because I thought that's what family does. But family doesn't treat each other like this. I can't believe you're doing this to me," Ashley sobbed. "After everything we've been through. I'm your little sister." "You're a parasite," Henry said quietly. "You've been using me your entire life, and I was too blind to see it." "Well, I see it now. Get out. Today." They packed and left within hours, Ashley alternating between crying and screaming about how we'd betrayed her. The moment they drove away, the house felt lighter somehow. The next day, Henry and I deep cleaned every room, erasing all traces of the chaos that had consumed our lives. As we collapsed onto our couch that evening, finally alone in our own home again, Henry turned to me. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "I should have listened to you years ago. I just always thought I had to take care of her. I never realized she was taking advantage of that." It's been months now, and we haven't heard from Ashley. She doesn't call, doesn't text, doesn't even try to guilt Henry on social media anymore. Sometimes I catch Henry checking his phone, hoping to see a message from his sister, not asking for money or favors, but just a simple apology. So far, it hasn't come. But we're okay. Our house is peaceful again, our marriage stronger for having weathered this storm. And Henry? He's finally learned that sometimes the hardest part of loving someone is knowing when to stop enabling them.